Hi, welcome to the Dan Bradbury podcast. The astute observer will realize he's not in the room with me. That's because he's on his honeymoon. So we thought we'd give him a couple weeks off to enjoy time with his new bride and instead play you the best of Dan Bradbury podcast. This podcast, we're going to be rebroadcasting one of his most popular episodes. It was with marketing legend Jay Abraham. If you've not had a chance to listen to this man speak, you are in for a treat. And if you have, you know you're going to be blown away with some of the most powerful first-order principles of marketing and getting your message out to the market. And by the way, might I add, he is the best-smelling man I have ever been in the presence of. I'm not kidding. The man smells delicious. Like, if I could invent a vape-scented smell of Jay Abraham, I'd just call this the Vape Abraham. And I'd take up vaping just to enjoy the scent of him again. He's an incredible man. Brilliant, wonderfully smelling Jay Abraham. So without further ado, let's get to the interview with Dan Bradbury and Jay Abraham.
Hi guys, so without any further delay, please let me welcome to this interview Mr. Jay Abraham. Jay, thanks for joining us.
Oh, come on, Dan. It's always my pleasure to contribute, and I think very highly of you and your work there in the UK, so it's an honor.
Well, thank you. So, Jay, there's so many places we could start. And I know that many of the most successful business owners and entrepreneurs I know say that they either studied under you or were directly mentored by you. You've got over 15,000 individual success stories across hundreds and hundreds of different industries. So probably a good place to start, Jay, is for those that are less familiar with your background. How did you become renowned as one of, if not the leading marketing mind in the world today?
Well, it's a very accidental story that it's pretty funny and it's a little bit sad. I got married the first time. I've been married three times. I'm not necessarily proud to say, but the first time at age 18, and I had two children at 20 and the need of someone, Dan, about 40. And unfortunately and fortunately, the world didn't care. So the only people who would give me opportunity were crazy entrepreneurs who would not give me a salary, but they'd give me a little chair in their office or a table or a desk and say, okay, you can have a share of whatever you create, like eat what you kill. And when you only eat when you earn, you figure out very quickly what works and what doesn't. And you concentrate almost just intuitively on the higher yielding things because you're not gonna make any money if you don't. And I was always a transient. I don't want to take this too long and protracted, but after a short stint in an industry, not a company, but an industry, I'd look at it and I'd see people working there for 20 years who, very frankly, weren't really making very much more than I was creating, just creating opportunities at will. And so I'd leave and I'd enter a totally different industry. And after about 10, I'll make this short. After about 10 unrelated industries, I realized that people in industry A don't have a clue what people in industry B, C, D, E do, how they think, how they market, what their strategies are, what their revenue approaches are, what their distribution channels are, their whole business models. And I started borrowing, as I call it, the success approaches from outside an industry, combining them together into hybrids that industry didn't know. This was 25, 30 years before best practices, anything like that. And I engineered outrageous breakthroughs, not because I was that great, but because, quite frankly, most of these companies were accepting a fraction of the performance outcome yield result that their effort, their opportunity, their activity, their investment, their everything could produce for them just because they didn't know any better. And I got this context of expansive understanding. It's sort of like the one-eyed man in the land of the blind. And everyone thought I was so great, which my greatness would probably have to be attributed to me being an emissary of ideas and knowledge from outside their reality. So that made a big difference. I don't know if that makes sense to you or not. That's when I created the concept of funnel vision versus tunnel vision. And that's unfortunately or fortunately, that was almost 35 years ago, and I've built on it dimensionally, basically upward, wide, deep, ever since, because of the scope, depth, and the expanse of activities, industries, businesses I've been privileged to work with worldwide.
Jay, I mean, a simple Google search against your name shows up over 13 million different websites, and a similar search on Amazon produces almost 400 different books where you are referenced or acknowledged, and your body of work is so large. But on preparing for this interview, one particular thing came up time and time again. And that was the strategy of preeminence. Could you perhaps warm us up a little bit to what exactly is the strategy of preeminence, and why is it so fundamental or critical for businesses today to practice it?
It's a strategic philosophy or a philosophical strategy, however you want to look at it, that should, and in my opinion, must become the guiding force, the foundation, the internal cultural thread, lifeblood that drives everything you do, your positioning, your mindset, your marketing, your and external communications. Pardon me. And I developed it, I don't know, 20 years ago, and it's propelled a lot of companies to greatness in their industry worldwide. But I'll give you the short explanation. It takes about 3 hours to explain it. I'll be happy to give you some links that you can put, not links, I'll give you the actual documents you can post on your own website, and a couple of videos that explain it, but it's quite profound. First of all, it's premised on the fact that you don't want to be a commodity in your business, no matter whether you take high end, low end, volume, small transactions, large dollars, whatever you do, you want to be seen as the only viable source in that category, the most trusted advisor to your market. And in order for that to occur, it requires shifts in paradigm, attitude, commitment, and whole ideological focus. More specifically and less abstractly, first thing is you've got to see yourself as a true masterful advisor to your market in the category that you operate in, and you got to be than they should, not because you're losing money, but because they're not getting the best outcome. If you really believe that they need and will benefit profoundly from having your product, your service, your company in their lives, you cannot allow them to, number one, procrastinate, equivocate, contemplate. Number two, you can't allow them to go to a competitor, not because the competitor is an asshole or a wretch, but because the competitor will not put the amount of contribution, value, concern, support, protection, enhancement into the client's life or business that you will. The next point is you've got to put into words what people feel and have never verbalized, and there's processes for that. But when you can help people get clarity on what they've been striving either for or striving to get away from, and they've never ever verbalized it in a clear cut, excuse me, 1 second, just take a little sip. A clear cut and very concrete way, it immediately emancipates in them clarity, certainty, power, trust. I'm just getting the short parts of it. The next part is you've got to become masterful at communicating to them in 3 different forms. One is expressing you understand what they feel and being able to articulate it in better words than they have. Number 2, using analogies and metaphors, because the mind relates in all of marketing and all of communication better to stories, examples, reference examples. The Bible would be a good example, parables. Next, you got to be able to future pace, which is take them into the future when they have your product, your service, your company in their lives, and not just talk about it transactionally, but talk about the depth of impact it makes. For example, I had a very large home builder in Mexico years ago, and they specialized in first-time entry-level homes, which were underwritten and subsidized by the government. And they kept seeing themselves, before I met them, as selling homes. I saw that by getting a young couple into a home in the beginning that was subsidized, that couple had a better life. The family had, that rather than living with their parents, which they do a lot in Mexico, they had a better marital relationship. They had more autonomy as a couple, instead of having the parents guide them and oversee and override their parenting. They had more intimacy. They were in communities that were new with quality people. The schools the kids went to were where the teachers were not apathetic. They were still excited and new. And so the learning was better, the education greater, the chance of them, really growing better and their life better. Excuse me again, I'm sorry for my voice. And the couple would be building wealth with the asset. And sometimes couples would inherit their parents' house, but even then the asset could work for them. They could rent it, and they could create income, or they could build a way to put their child through any college they want anywhere in the world. And I took all of those points, I'm not trying to be tangential, but I showed that company and all their salespeople, they weren't selling homes. They were privileged, and they got the chance to transform the lives of families each and every day, and not just a man and a wife, their children, their future, their financial security, their marital success, the growth and safety and the quality of life for their family, their kids' future. And that was transformatic. Is that a little too outlandish or abstract, or is that helpful?
That is extremely helpful, Jay. Extremely helpful. In fact, it kind of reminds me of the very first time I came across you, Jay, some time ago, probably almost a couple of decades ago now, was, like many people, was via Tony Robbins on what's a now legendary interview that Tony did with you for his Power Talk series. Tell me, how did because the reminder was that Tony just asked you in that interview, what exactly is marketing? But tell me, how did that relationship develop? How did you? Because that's been a very successful partnership. I mean, Tony says that describes you as being the foremost strategist for small and large companies in the world. Jay is a true marketing master. How did that relationship with Tony Robbins come about?
It's an interesting story. His former president knew me from another business that man ran, and then he was running Tony's business, and they had a couple of issues they were trying to struggle through. One was one of their biggest programs. They hadn't really figured out the positioning and the articulation. And they brought me in, and I was able to figure it out, and it did exceptionally well. And they wanted me to speak for Tony at a big event, and it was offshore. And I didn't do things for money. I did it for just the contribution back then. And I didn't really care, but I said, I'll tell you what, if you will interview me and let me have the interview, I will do it gratis. And he was doing a subscription service then called Power Talk. One more second. I'm so sorry. And he thought I wanted him to do this interview for Power Talk. And Power Talk had a very elite subscriber base, but not a huge one. But I knew that Tony was really masterful and profoundly adroit at asking questions, not arrogantly, but in behalf of his audience in a very deep, penetrating, probative way. And I was eager to get my thinking clarified by an outside catalyst. So I said, I don't care if you use it in Power Talk. I just want to use it myself. And I prepared, this is what's very interesting. I prepared 40 pages of different perspectives on my then body of work. If today I was doing it, geez, it'd be probably 400, because I've transcended that by orders of magnitude. But, excuse me again, but I sent him 40 pages with different uh, concepts, distinctions, commentaries, examples. And I didn't think he would really read much of it. But when we started, I was awestruck and stunned. He had made notes on every line, not every paragraph or page, every line. And that gave me enormous respect for the preparation and the diligence. I'm looking at the notes you made in anticipation of this, gives me great respect. But then as we started talking, he got what I was all about instantly. And we were able to track and expand on it. And the truth of the matter, which is, it's an interesting story, that has become a classic. I'm very proud that I was the recipient of his really masterful questions. I was able to answer them intelligently enough that I proved a worthy sort of interacting sort of an intellectual spar for him. But the truth is that interview lasted 9 hours. We started at 11 or maybe it was a little later, 3. But we went till 3 in the morning, and this is before digital recording like this. So you had what we called DATs, and DATs was a special, like a mini version of a VCR type of a VHS recorder, and we ran out of DATs. We were going full strong. One more second. Please forgive me. I've been drinking too much coffee. We went full strong until we ran out of DATs, but they took 9 hours, and some of the really most interesting but more unique and nuanced ideas made the cutting room floor. But this is the quintessential distillation of 9 hours of very, very stimulating and back and forth, very spirited and fluid dialogue. Anyhow, it came out. He gave it to me. He wasn't going to use it in his power talk, but it ended up being, and I'm very proud of it, one of what they called the legendary ones, the ones that, were with people like Coach John Wooden, who was famous here, Stephen R. Covey, who became a very dear friend and advocate of me. It got distributed by Tony a lot, but we sent out millions of them, and they still are very popular, which is interesting. But from that point on, I think he got a respect for not just the quality of my thinking and methods and mindset, but the purpose, because he's very purpose-driven and I'm very purpose-driven. I think there was a natural bond ideologically, and I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I would explain it.
That's fascinating. I know certainly for me that was almost like a Bible for me of sorts of marketing when I was starting my first businesses, like I said, almost 20 years ago. And that brings me on to the next part, Jay. I put out a message on social media saying that we were going to be recording this interview, and I asked for questions, and I got flooded with them. And I've just taken a brief selection of those, and I thought we could run down them. And I think the first, I'll give you the first two together because it kind of ties in with what you're saying and why I believe that Tony Robbins interview that he did with you is such a classic. It was because it was based on fundamentals. So one question. So I'll give you two questions together, Jay, and you can, because I believe they kind of blend into an answer together. But the first question was from Rob Moore, who said, what marketing fundamentals have stood the test of time, start to finish, of your career? But then Dan Gregory said, I'd be fascinated to know if Jay sees a disconnect between traditional marketing fundamentals and what has become common practice within digital marketing, i.e., what are modern marketers missing? So Jay, I suppose the question, the cumulative question is, what are the fundamentals, and are any of those fundamentals changing as you see it with the kind of onslaught of digital marketing and social media?
Making a note. And by the way, I would love to see all 400 or 300 or 100 of the questions you got submitted. if you still have them, it'd be very interesting to me. Just 1 second, because I want to give you in an orderly way a meaningful answer that will help everyone. So just 1 second, and I'll figure it out. Okay, so let's start with what I think is lacking. I think what's lacking is authentic trust building. So, and I'll get back to that in a minute. I think what's lacking is empathic understanding and appreciation of what it's like to be in the shoes of both a client and also your team member. I think what's lacking is the willingness to really be vulnerable and connect yourself. And I think that the online marketing scope lends itself to anonymity and superficiality, although that's not true of everybody. And I'll get into it a little bit, but let's talk about universal factors, forces, principles, distinctions that have proven the test of time immemorial. So the first one is unique selling proposition, i.e. now preeminence. If you don't have a distinct purpose, benefit, positioning that is decisively superior in terms of the niche you're filling, you're basically a commodity today, and you've always been. And we can go deep and do a whole session on that. Second, the 3-way to grow a business. I mean, really and truly, I've got 3 advanced ways, and I'll share them about all 6 right now. But basically, you either generate more buyers or prospects and convert more prospects to buyers. You get buyers ethically and honestly buying more quantity and combinations. You get them buying more, more often, more things. And if you don't have more things to sell, you connect and you access and you offer other things that are complementary or the natural next adjunct. And that's immutable. I mean, that's how you use the geometry of a business. It's always been, it hasn't changed. The ways you get there certainly changes. There's premiums and there's all kinds of diversions or variations, excuse my language. The 3 advanced ways to do it, it's a little variation, is number 1, every year you penetrate a new market or niche. Every year you introduce a new product or service suite or product suite. Number 3, every year you acquire either a competitive business or a complementary business. And complementary can mean 3 things: what people buy before they buy yours, what they buy during the time they buy yours, what they buy after they buy yours, or an alternative way, means of achieving the same outcome you offer. For example, if you were in the business of just as an easy hypothetical example, a supplement, and you were selling supplements for weight loss, for example, your competitors could be other weight loss supplements, but your competitors would also be, they could be personal trainers, they could be portion control food, they could be videos, they could be gyms, they could be video instructions, online memberships. They could be any of a diversity of things. And the stat, the typical person who tries one weight loss really is going to try 6 or 7, sometimes concurrently, but certainly continuously. And a lot of prospects who don't buy yours can be converted to something else, and vice versa. And I don't want to get too esoteric, but that's all. And you can buy these businesses on earnouts or on revenue shares, so you don't put up any money. And we've got hours and hours of what we've done on that, and just dozens, probably hundreds of success stories worldwide who've done this. Those are universal. Risk reversal is even more relevant today, and it has to be dimensionalized in a much more powerful way. If I say to you, for example, using the example of the weight loss supplement, that it's money back guaranteed 30 days. That's one thing. If I say to you, Dan, if within the first 30 days you can't honestly say that you don't just see at least 5 pounds uh, uh, disappear and leave your body, but you feel so much better wearing your pants or tucking in your shirt front or back, or you start seeing your chin line more distinctive, or your muscles underneath your abs, and you got more energy and you feel more vibrant, and people are starting to comment even though it's only been 30 days, and you know that if you stick the course you're going to get such a multiplied result. If you aren't at least at that point within 30 days, I don't deserve, or we don't deserve, to keep your money, and we insist on not. Even if you haven't finished the supply you purchased, we insist you send back either the empty bottle or what is left, and we will not keep your money, because, and that's a much more dimensionalized risk reversal. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. It makes total sense.
So you got to improve that. I'm sorry, but you asked me. It's still viable, but not just generalized. You have to take it to a much more dimensional and firsthand experiential, sort of a future-paced example.
No, that was really good, Jay. And that ties into another question that I've got, which is a little bit counterintuitive, from Stuart. So Stuart says,
and then, Dan, 1 second. I can go through a much larger litany of universal. I'm just giving you a few. I mean, value creation, dimensionalization of the process, preemptive marketing, where you reveal what you do that maybe all your competitors do, but nobody's ever known it, and you sound like you do something much different. Bonuses. I can go through that, but the one thing, by the way, before you tell me that, I want to make a point. I am one of the believers that free has very little value anymore. And you have to basically dimensionalize the fact that you're investing or buying them something, and that something has enormous value if put to use, and that the reason you're making it available is a belief and expectation that they are worth the investment, and the implied expectation that they're going to take what you have invested and bought them and do something with it, and it won't be just a link that they never open, or a document that they never read, or a trial a supply that they never take. And I think there's got to be more of a commitment and a dual agreement or implied contract of commitment, because I think free means nothing, and everything in the world is free, and people get all the free crap and they do nothing with it. And that's just one more point. Now, please let me apologize and continue with what you were going to say.
Well, that's just made me change tact slightly. I want to talk about unique selling proposition, because I know there's a whole litany of things that we could discuss, but Tim Tavender asked an interesting question. He said, Jay, if you were starting a business in 2017, what would you do and how would you start? And I suppose in my mind, Jay, that triggered the thought of unique selling proposition. And Tim's perhaps a little different than our average listener in that he's obviously in a startup phase. But how would you approach when somebody's first starting out, Jay? How would you approach it so that they could position themselves differently in the marketplace?
Well, it's a great question. And ironically, while it's not what I really do anymore, we created a wonderful, wonderful specialized program for the Japanese market, because they have a very big problem with young adults, millennials, if you will. They have a huge problem with 40,000 of them commit suicide every year walking into the woods because they feel hopeless and helpless in their plight, career-wise and future. And we created a really cool system of about, I think, 9 different paths they could take without any investment or any risk. And it's sort of cool, but I'll give you a couple of them now. The question it predisposes itself towards something you would get into. And I would suggest that the question is, how many ways can you enhance the probability of having a very successful business in today's market that will sustain, grow? And I think there's a number of ways. Service businesses normally have more sustainability, more profit potential, and more asset value. And because of the margins, they give you much more acquisition allowance, because you have such a low cost of fulfillment when you reach critical mass. So I would look at service businesses. However, there's all kinds of alternative things that are just killer that you can do. Number one, you can find people who, first of all, I'm going to give you a statistic. The majority of small businesses, 500,000 to 2 million, whether it be pounds or dollars, never sell, because there's no systems to them, there's no structure to them. The owner is the driving force. Towards the end of his or her life, they decide it's worth a fortune. No one buys it. If they do sell it, it barely gets more than a year or two's worth of multiple on income, not on revenue. The person gives them a note and buys it out. Sometimes the owner has to stay there. So the point I'm making is, you can identify companies where the owner is at an age that they're going to want to sell. And since the reality is most of them don't sell, they just close up, go bankrupt, because they just stop competing and they take money out. They don't keep reinvesting. If you walked in and said, I want to basically work for you, and if you knew marketing and you could do it without a salary, because it's the opposite of investing. You're investing in intellectual capital, and you could say, I'll grow this business. I want to share the growth, and if we get to a certain point, I want that share to give me options that I can buy into the business and take it over at the end. And you do an earn in instead of an earn out. That's very cool. You can do that. Another thing you can do is find, where there's an airport and a car. Let me wait till it goes by. Okay. Another way is you can go to independent. When you're talking UK, so it's not as probably powerful there as it would be here. You go to somebody who has a very successful business in a city or in a region that has no desire to go anywhere else with it, and you make a deal where you do a license with them, where you get to model everything: their system, their marketing, their distribution, their suppliers, and you basically, it's not a franchise. You just give them a royalty for it, and you can take it all over. Once you build it, if they don't want to do any more with it, you can replicate it in other places. You can go to companies that have a brand, they have distribution, they have a certain product line, and they have a certain profile of buyers, and you can create other ancillary product service offerings under their brand that you can take through their distribution to those buyers. And it can be everything from, as I said, things people buy before, during, after. It can be alternatives that people don't that buy instead. You can always buy a franchise, but a lot of franchises I don't recommend, because they may have operating systems, but they don't really have good marketing, sourcing, revenue generating approaches. That's why I would rather go find somebody successful who doesn't want to grow outside their area, and model and borrow their success approaches, not just operationally, but revenue. Another approach, if you look at successful companies in any industry, the ones that are the most successful normally have developed a distinctive and a superior ability in one or multiple areas. They're either superior marketers, or they're superior cash flow managers, or superior merchandisers, or superior at opening up accounts, or getting or developing sales, or superior in building relationships, or superior in finding profit partners. And if you can figure out what that superiority is in different companies, in different industries, and make an arrangement to isolate and then systematize what they are unknowingly sometimes so superior at, then you can take that knowledge and you can license, partner, profit share it with all kinds of other companies in either the similar business if they're not going to take it all over the world, or in related or or corresponding type businesses. Say that you model a electrical distribution company, and you take that to a plumbing distribution company, or you can do that all day long, and you can find people who have the skill sets and all kinds of things. We used to teach, give you a couple of examples. We had years ago a guy who was in the dry cleaning business. And he had 3 dry cleaners in Chicago, and he was just killing it. He was doing about 3 times the average revenue per store of a regular dry cleaner, but he had no growth aspirations whatsoever outside of Chicago. So he developed a really cool system, and he got 1,000 or 2,000 dry cleaners, I don't remember, to pay him $100 a month for him to share whatever he was doing every month. And he was making, I don't know, $1.5–2 million just from repurposing what he was doing to people he would never be competing against. We had a real estate expert who sold her agency to Remax, and she couldn't compete for 30 miles, but she was masterful at listings, and she went outside of the 30-mile area and started making $85,000 a weekend teaching her listing process only to people all over the country. We had a guy in a lumber mill, and lumber mills are really interesting because the key expense and leverage point is energy in twofold. One, that's the biggest expense, the energy for the kilns. That, the kiln drying is how the raw timber becomes lumber. Now you know if you didn't. The second is, depending on your accuracy, the product you produce can be A grade, double A grade, B, C, or can be reject. So there's a lot of variability. And this guy was masterful at both controlling and reducing the energy cost and increasing and producing the highest outcome of lumber, which combined gave him both savings and profit combinations that made him an extra couple $1 million a year. But because of the weight of lumber, he could have given the lumber away, and it's only viable because of transportation for whatever 1,000 miles. So anybody out of that range, including worldwide, that was selling lumber wasn't really a direct competitor. So we took his kiln drying methodology, and he started off teaching it for $25,000. Then he started licensing it every year because he'd come up with more nuances and enhancements and evolved the processes. And he started getting a piece of the savings and a piece of the metrics, meaning if people were producing 20% scrap and we could get it to 10, we'd get a piece. If they were producing only 30% double A and we could get it to 50%. I'm just giving you a few of the ways you can do it, but there's a lot of ways. Is that good?
That's fantastic. That's fantastic, Jay. So I'm just going to keep flying through some of these questions. So you said an interesting thing related to the lumber mill about expenses. So Stuart asked an interesting question. He said, we're told to grow or shrink. He said, if I'm looking to sell my business in the near future, I might want to slow or even stop the growth, which kind of doesn't make sense to me when I'm reading that point. But I'm guessing what he means is he doesn't want to. He wants to run at the highest possible margin to make it look as profitable as possible, i.e., not spend as aggressively to consume cash. So he says, how do you do this without going backwards or shrinking? So I think if I read the question correctly, Jay, it's similar to the in the sticking point solution. He's saying, how do you get unstuck if you're stuck with your costs eating up the profits?
It's a great question, but let me try to answer it first of all from a logic and a critical thinking. You can do it if you're going to try to maximize profits. Anybody with a good brain will see that you're doing so at the cost of future revenue. And if they're buying your business for an operating business instead of just a strategic reason to integrate into something else, and they're buying it as a going concern. Going concern means they have certainty that you have in place processes to grow it, and if you stop doing that, it seems like having a lot of profit would be the only denominator, but it's only one of a multitude of denominators that a sophisticated investor would use to buy it. An unsophisticated one might say, "Wow, you're making $500,000 last year. You made 200,000. Gee, this is great." But really, what you're saying is, "I'm killing the business." So you have to really be very mindful of that. But in order to give you an outcome that will achieve both, we've done extensive work in strategic alliances, joint ventures, power partnering, relational capital, where you find all kinds of other companies who have the resources, the technology, the distribution, the sales, the storage, the technology. I probably said that, the expertise you need, but don't either want or can't afford to pay for with a check, and you end up with an unlimited checkbook by making strategic alliances that are tied to outcomes. In other words, instead of being frustrated because you can't afford let's call it a shipping expert or a manufacturing specialist to consult with you, you either find somebody who's great at that and you joint venture with them for their shipping. You don't need it anymore. You use theirs and they already have the logistics and the trucks or the relationships. Or you find experts, and instead of paying them their $2,000 rate, you correlate a compensation that is tied to results, and you pay them a multitude of the 2,000 on the outcome they produce. So if you realize you don't have to write checks, you can have an unlimited checkbook for as much as you want. And it's a function of two things: your ability to compellingly prove three things. The opportunity you're offering is bigger than the fee that they would charge. And number two, the expertise they have will be outrageously impactful because they can depend on you to apply it. And I mean, I can give you lots of different ways, but that's a generalization. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes a lot of sense. So Jay,
so those are two things, but I'd worry about just trying to maximize your profit, because anyone with, I mean, and a young, zealous person saying, okay, he made 500 grand, even though he makes half as much, it'll make 400 if I don't do anything different. But that's not always true. It can drop precipitously if you stop the queue or the pipeline from coming. So you might, I mean, in preeminence, you have a moral obligation to do what's best for the client, and in this case, the client would be the acquirer. And you don't ever, I mean, if you've done it purposely that way, and you're willing to explain what you've done, and you're willing to explain how to ratchet back or turn back on the spigot, that probably has integrity. But if you're not, I think it's covert, and I think a sophisticated person will you don't even have to tell them. They'll know it, but they'll think it's suspect, and they'll see that you're covert, and that it's a true, but it's a misrepresentation of the real condition of the future of the business. So I'd be very careful of that.
Thank you, Jay. So Jay, the next question is from Arthur, and Arthur, you'll love this business, Jay. She runs a business that provides the largest of its type in the world, that provides matrimonial services to practicing Muslims with over 100,000 members. And Arthur's question was, what's the one single piece of advice you would give to someone who wants to scale and grow in their business?
Well, I mean, the first thing is I would want to know who else had my target audience. I'd want to know what, if you're scaling in a competitive world, what everyone else is doing and what they're not doing, what their positioning is, where you can add value. I'd want to know all the places they are accessing their audience, so you get clarity on what your options and your opportunities are. You probably know that I do a lot of work, Dan, in the category of what's called performance enhancement, optimization, getting the highest and best use. I take what your question is a general, and it means nothing if you don't ask sub questions and get good answers before you pursue this growth trajectory. I do a lot of work in the area of getting highest and best use out of time, effort, opportunity, commitment, people, dollars. And so I don't want to do anything until I know the lay of the land, and I got a very good context, intelligence-wise, of what I'm dealing with, what the weaknesses are, who's got my market that I could partner with. If I can't partner, what media is being used, what media has been overlooked, who's got a business that may be weak, but I could take it over and either operate it separately and crisscross pollinate, or operate it, absorb it on an earn out. There's a lot of questions, and I hope these are helpful. I drive people crazy because I've been introduced in the scope of my very vast experiences to so many different ways to deal with an issue. And my discipline is a critical thinking reflection of all the options, and then isolating the options and figuring out which one or ones are the highest and best with the least amount of downside, the highest amount of viability, not always the biggest profit, but where success is a more probable outcome than failure. And most people just say, okay, I'm going to spend more money. And usually when you spend more money in the conventional form of marketing that you're using right now, you start getting a dilution just for, I'm not sure the scientific reason, but if you don't keep, and you also have to figure out what different approaches can I use. For example, if you look at a search in a big category, you might see 20 people who have keywords there, and you might have the top, but there's no reason you couldn't have 10 more that were competing with yourself on different positioning levels. Because what I always do when I work with a client, Dan, we break their business into two parts: what they are doing now, where they're doing it, how they're doing it, how it's doing, and then what they could be doing different, better, concurrently. We focus first on what they're doing because that's driving the business. Even if I think it's very suboptimal, even dumb, we try to make whatever they're doing do better. Normally, they're not optimizing whatever they're doing. It's probably the wrong thing to be doing by itself, but they're probably doing it the wrong way or not the best way, or they're missing. I mean, they have so many different factors. There's something like 25 overlooked impact or leverage points in the average company's revenue system that they don't even identify. And you can make each one of them, even if it's only 10, produce 10, 15% more, and the aggregation is geometric. So we try to focus that first before they go outside to grow, because that can produce hundreds of percent growth. Then we start, when we do that, we've gone all the way through their system, and we look at what they're seeing but don't know they're seeing, so we can capitalize on a lot more. For example, they might be accidentally getting 30% of their buyers who are doctors, but it's quite accidental. They've never targeted doctors. And we're trying to look at what the data tells us. Then, after we've sort of optimized what they're doing now, maximizing it, then we start multiplying what they can do by introducing lots of new either markets, media, methods, models to grow the business. And it's an integrative process. Most people just, and this is going to sound vulgar, but balls to the wall, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. And it's a very promiscuous and it's a very suboptimal approach. I believe in the philosophy: you slow down so you can run inordinately faster, but you slow down and you take the time to understand all the factors, the forces, the elements that are either going to be under your command, or they're going to constrain you. And you want to have control of everything you can and not be controlled by things you've never thought through. And I'm sorry I don't give direct answers. I don't believe there are direct answers. I think without the nuances and the context and the basis, it's like saying I want to build a skyscraper and I have a vision of it, but I don't want a foundation. I don't want girders. I don't want plumbing. I just want to have a really cool building. I hope I'm sounding crazy.
Jay, I understand precisely what you mean. And one of the things that I love about you, Jay, is your ongoing, insatiable appetite to learn more. And I know that, you even on this call before we hit record, Jay, one of the first things Jay asked me was how was business, and when I shared about some of the growth and the great results I've been having, Jay immediately started to ask me a series of questions to why, and I think a lot of people, Jay, would expect that you are just now dispensing advice when actually I know you to continuously be a student. So a question from Alex, which kind of aligns with that very nicely, was asked, what are Jay Abraham's favorite books or places to learn?
When I answer you, it's going to be surprising. I am remiss in reading at the level I should, but I compensate that because what I do is I have a portfolio of clients worldwide that's about as crazy disparate as you can imagine. I counsel, for example, the #1 human resource company in China through translation. Sounds impressive. They provide factory workers. I counsel the top elderly care service company in China. They own retirement homes and retirement services. I counsel the #1 specialty pharmaceutical company in China, big in China. They do migraines and prostate. I counsel a company that does special ops training for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and they do cybersecurity for the government. I counsel the man who is the preeminent expert in the world on dental implant surgery and how to add an implant sub-practice to what you do. I counsel probably the best and the best known organization that's worldwide that develops and mentors young technology-based entrepreneurs that are working on for-profit global solutions. I counsel the man in Japan who sold $85 million worth of tiaras to the Dubai Museum, and he owns Catherine the Great's necklace. I'm going to bring to the point in a minute. I counsel 2 companies that are very big in catastrophic water damage restoration. I counsel a company that Google brings in when they have $1 million plus monthly clients who want greater ROI on their investment on Google so that they can spend more money. I counsel a guy who's a provider of all the membership management methodology for martial arts schools. I counsel the 3rd largest wine company in China. I counsel Damon John, who's a very prominent person on a TV show here called Shark Tank. I think it's Dragon's Den or something like that in the UK. I counsel a man named Dave Asprey, who runs one of the most popular companies of its kind, Bulletproof Coffee. I counsel Ramit Sethi. I'm telling you all this for a reason. Ramit Sethi, who is probably the #2 influential millennial, not in just doing silly things like texting or showing off your cleavage, but in really helping millennials get a handle on how to build a really qualitative and a financially secure life. And I'm telling you, I've got dozens more, but I'm telling you this because I get to learn from each one of them, and they read tons of books, so I get the distillation of what they got out of it by the interactions we have and the expressions they give me of what they're trying to do because of an insight they get or a concept from books. So I get vicariously educated, not just on all kinds of industries and processes and competitive emergent developments, products, services, breakthroughs, but I get really my knowledge base from the books everyone else reads, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. It's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about the interviews. Like yourself, Jay, so many great people have been interviewed for this podcast, and I know I learn tremendous amounts for them. So, Jay, we've got time for just two final quick questions. So the first one is, Jay, you've done achieved many things that many people only dream of. But if you could rewind the clock, Jay, back to and speak to the Jay Abraham at the start of your career, what's the one piece of advice, or what's the one change that you might make to your approach that would have allowed you to achieve even greater things?
Probably three things. Easier and more structured ability to translate my methodologies and my concepts. I always was, most of my life has been being on the front lines of capitalism and having to really shift and customize and not really think about here's what to do first, second, third, because many of my clients were not in need of that. They had a log jam somewhere in their system and we had to remove the log jam. So when I started, I would give people such an expanse of options, but I would never really give them do this first, do this second. And it was partially because I never really followed that dictum. I would go in sort of as a, what would you call it? I'd sort of have to parachute in and untangle Gordian knots, and they weren't always in the beginning of the process or at the end. People didn't know where they were. And I think if I had made it easier to start here, start there, do this first, second, third, here's how to do it, it would have been much easier. Secondly, I think I should have been, depends on quantity versus quality. You made a comment, and I'm going to clarify it, but not to be arrogant. I actually have 100,000 plus success stories today, which is pretty remarkable. And my concept of a success story is hard and specific. It has, if I get somebody who's got an aspirational testimonial, I feel like I figured out what to do. Now I know what I'm going to pursue. I got a whole new idea or direction. I throw those away because they have nothing to do with achievement. They have only something to do with a self-aggrandizing affirmation, and I will only deal with results. But the 100,000 sounds really impressive, but I've probably impacted 3, 4, 5, 10 million people, and it's very disheartening. So the question is, should I have concentrated quality over quantity? And if the answer is yes, should I have been much more restrictive and disciplined in my criteria? Should I've only helped people who understood value creation, really their organization, understood preeminence as opposed to anybody? I'm going, and then should I have bought businesses? Because I've created many billions of dollars of wealth for people, and I'm not a pauper, but I was always more interested in the diversity of intellectually challenging, multifaceted activities. And I've made very, very, what I command for counseling or advising or masterful thinking is quite profound, but it's nothing compared to the equities I've created for others and haven't really taken full advantage of. And then finally is, I think I've done lots of, there's one more. I've done lots of, I can't even remember. I've got the 3 ways to grow business. I've got the power Parthenon of geometric business. I've got the 3 advanced ways. I got the strategy of preeminence. I got the 9 drivers of exponential growth. I got the 21 power principles. I got the 9 sticking points. I've got the X factors. I've got the CEO who can see around corners. I've got the leverage marketing points. I've got the 12 strategy ethos. I've got We're working on relevancy rules, how relevancy is the bedrock of everything in your life, and it's dynamic. I got all these things. I do them. I haven't done any of them for years. I'm a little bit bored on my body of work, and I like to do just Q&As like this and very elevated problem solving. And I probably should have broken my body of work into silos and dispatched people to teach it in different factions, categories. And then lastly, I'm a savant. I'm very gifted and feel blessed. I'm not saying it arrogant, it's clinical, in marketing strategy, understanding the human condition and how to appreciate and how to connect and how to really delightfully understand and enjoy human beings. But I don't do much anything. I don't turn on my computer. I'm technologically imbecilic. I've got one app. It's an Uber app that I don't use myself. Whenever I need to catch one, I get somebody to do it for me. And I got intimidated by the internet. So we've done almost nothing. Where it's amazing. We have here 20, 30 million, websites that refer to me. We have a lot of distinction, and we're always number one on the searches, even though we don't pay anybody and do anything. And I probably should have used my knowledge base and the internet to reach more millennials, more people worldwide, because I started out unbeknownst to me, but I was driven with a purpose, and that was to add value to people, adding value, helping people who are making a difference or who were filling a void, reach and serve more people. And that's a function of a commitment, not to make money, although you get rewarded to make money for doing this commitment, but of reaching people continuously. And I've probably been lazy in my rationale of wanting to work more at this point in my life with business people. If you go to my website, which I'm not advocating you do, you will see that unlike most people, we give away better content, resources, programs than most people sell. And even more hilariously, we don't ask for an opt-in, because I decided 5 years ago I wanted to be the biggest benefactor and contributor to beleaguered entrepreneurs who perhaps couldn't afford me, or even if they couldn't believe that I could help them. And I knew that they were worth the investment. So we decided somebody had to make the first investment. We were going to be the worldwide premier contributor of quality knowledge, understanding, ideology, wisdom, techniques, methodology to entrepreneurs, because we felt it would always come back. But I've done a lot of things I wish I would have done differently. I've probably not been as good a father, good a husband, because I've been mercilessly enraptured and seduced by entrepreneurship. And it's my life, day, night. I'm on the phone counseling people over the world early in the morning, one part of the world, or late evening, another. So, a lot of things that I would relive in my life, but all you can do is try to be a better person from this moment on, because you can't meaningfully alter yesterday. You can just capitalize and embrace today with more commitment, conviction, contribution.
Jay, I've absolutely loved this interview, and I'm sure the listeners have as well. Where is the best place, or where may they go if they want to find out more and study, listen, learn more of your material?
It's a very gracious question, and I will answer it. There's one way, but there's two versions. It's abraham.com, and it can be confusing because we're not as user friendly. I haven't put as much effort into that as I should. But if you go to abraham.com/50 shades, 50 shades, you will get access to outrageous content that doesn't require any opt-in. There's something like 10 hours on preeminence. There's hundreds of pages or 1,000 pages of instruction. There's interviews between Tony Robbins, Peter Diamandis. There's 10,000, I think it's there, 10,000 headlines that we've collected recently from online, very provocative headlines. There's interviews of famous people, really deep interviews. There's material on how to be a maven, how to be preeminent. There's courses. There's hidden surprises behind icons, and we don't ask for any opt-in at all. If you want to opt in, very candidly, our emails are unlike anybody else's emails. They're not hyperbole, just superficially trying to beat a concept that we're commercializing. They're usually very deep, either ideological, philosophical, methodological, and they address and they explore very deep ideas that have very, very meaningful significance in our business lives and also our total lives. We occasionally make a commercial offer that's very unique, and usually it's a beta test. I do beta tests all the time and never do anything after that. But yeah, you want to get a ton of outrageous and probably preeminent resources, content that don't sell one solid thing. You can get a year's worth of it or a lifetime's worth of it gratis with no opt-in required on abraham.com/50 shades. And the only thing we ask is tell a lot of other people, because we're committed to having our brand be known and followed, not because it's egotistical, but because we think preeminently we have a moral responsibility to get everyone to tell everyone, because we contribute far greater knowledge, ideas, and wisdom and really business growth and life growth information. If you want to be on the Abraham.com email list, you get some pretty cool things. If you want to just make a decision afterwards, I think we have 70 of the non-selling emails posted on that Abraham.com 50 shades. So either one, either one.
Fantastic. Well, all that leaves me to say is, Jay Abraham, thank you very much.
It has been a pleasure, and I want to acknowledge that you're doing meaningful and qualitative work there. And I think that you're trying, not trying in the unsuccessful, but I mean in the constant, never-ending commitment to grow, to make such a profound difference in the lives of entrepreneurs there, that I want to laud you. And I have one question of you, and it's a sincere one in case you hang up. Can I get an audio file of this quickly? Because I actually think it was an unusual one. I don't usually do this kind of interview, and I think you penetrated and precipitated some really stimulating answers that I would like to share with my list as well, and then link them to your work. But I'd love to get a copy of this post haste, because I'll put it out this week.
Fantastic, Jay. I can give you the raw one right away, or I can give you the edited one.
Give me the raw one.
Great.
Give me the raw one. I'll have it fixed.
Perfect. I'll send it over right away.
Okay, and I want to tell you that I hope that I gave you the value you wanted.
Thank you, Jay. It was tremendous. I enjoyed it very much.
Okay, likewise. Bye. And
I hope you enjoyed that episode. 3 things you need to do now. Number 1, make sure you subscribe to this podcast so you do not miss an episode. Also, get on over to Amazon to get a copy of my latest book, Turnover is Vanity, Profit is Sanity, 9.5 steps to improving your profits and cash flow. Also, join our Facebook group, the Turnover is Vanity, Profit is Sanity community, to connect with other business owners.